In continuing on with this, I'm on page 23. I go on to put in this package 12 USC 95A, which is regulation of transactions in foreign exchange of gold and silver, property transfers, vested interest, enforcement, and penalties. And this is a very important statute. This comes from the statutes at large. The one off the top of my head, if you look under statutes at large 48 stat 1, this is referred to. It's suggested that you do not use the United States Code, as that is prima facie evidence of law, but the statutes at large are considered law. That may be very true, and I'm not denying that, but of course most people don't have the statutes at large handy or readily available to look up, so I just recommend you put the United States Code, or you could go back to the statutes at large. So I put that, the 12 USC 95A, in this package. You want to specifically look at a 1, parentheses 1 and parentheses 2. 3 and 4 are not that important. But again, what it's basically saying is, during the times of war, the president may, through any agency that he may designate, and under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe by means of instructions, licenses, or otherwise, and then go on to investigate, regulate, direct, and compel, nullify, void, prevent, or prohibit any acquisition, holding, withholding, use, transfer, withdrawal, transportation, import, in other words, when there's declared a national state of emergency, which happened, I believe, in March 1933, the president, the U.S. Constitution goes to the side, it all just, and then it's under what's the right word? It's under a certain part of the Constitution where that's just put to the side. Going into parentheses 2, any payment, conveyance, transfer, assignment, or delivery of property or interest therein made to or for the account of the United States, or is otherwise directed pursuant to this section, or any rule, regulation, instruction, or direction issued hereunder, shall, to the extent thereof, be a full acquittance and discharge for all purposes of the obligation of the person making the same. And no person shall be held liable in any court for or in respect to anything done or omitted in good faith in connection with the administration of, or in pursuance of, and in reliance of this section, or any rule, regulation, instruction, or direction issued hereunder. Some people interpret that a certain way. The way I've interpreted that is, during a declared national state of emergency, and in this specific example, using the birth certificate, what the president has done is he seized, oh, he did not seize, well, he did seize and confiscated the title to that property. A name is considered property, and to fund the government operations. And obviously, when the baby or the individual receives the birth certificate, it's only a certified copy. And every time you use that name, it automatically, for specifically commerce, it automatically vests a beneficial interest to the United States. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little bit off this morning. I just want to get this completed. And again, it's important to study this and really grasp what took place, not be angry over it. This is not legal advice. It's just so we wake up people to see what actually took place. It's not about getting angry. It's not about resenting, but it's how to get us so we're not participating to our own detriment in their private internal system. And I'm hoping Donald Trump now that he's been elected, will certainly drain the swamp, because it's pretty bad. It's very disturbing that people can take advantage of others to the extent by deception and trickery, specifically in law, which is pretty not nice. So continuing on with the narrative, it appears there exists a remedy or indemnification or acquittance or discharge under the national state of emergency for the title or name as evidence that man has been left naked and spoliated. Since all property or titles have been assigned, conveyed, transferred, delivered, etc., made to and for the account of the United States under 12 U.S.C. 95A2, parentheses 2, it looks like since all property has been seized, it does appear man has no recourse whatsoever but to acknowledge and accept and agree what has already taken place and release and surrender any and all claims to the usufruct and reversionary interest. And I go into the issue of reversionary interest. This was a very complicated issue for me to learn, and I want to thank Boris for really explaining this, as well as I guess anybody can explain it. So the definition of reversionary interest: the interest which a person has in the reversion of lands, parentheses real estate, or other property. A right to the future enjoyment of property, at present in the possession or occupation of another. So when you think about that, our potential natural rights have been seized, and there is a trust or an estate formed, and potentially we can come back and claim that. Now that seems to be one school of thought. I do not believe that is our estate, though I have heard, and don't know if it's true, that others have claimed that estate and have been successful. My preference is to do everything or have everything understood in under the rule of usufruct, where I am out of the picture entirely. So continuing on with the definition, and let me reread the definition again, because it is not an easy concept to grasp. Reversionary interest, the definition: the interest which a person has in the reversion of lands, parentheses real estate, or other property. A right to the future enjoyment of property, at present in the possession or occupation of another. The property that reverts to the grantor after the expiration of an intervening income interest. Assume, for example, G places real estate in trust with income to A for 11 years, and upon the expiration of this term, the property returns to G. Under these circumstances, G has retained a reversionary interest in the property. A reversionary interest is the same as a remainder interest, except that the latter case, the property passes to someone other than the original owner, for example, the grantor of a trust. Upon the expiration of the intervening interest, see also Clifford Trust, remainder, reversionary, Black's, and this comes from Black's 6th edition. And I continue to touch upon a little bit of the reversionary interest. There exists the minute possibility that someday that infant may return from the sea, because you have to remember they assume the infant, which is a decedent, which is a person, the blah blah blah, is lost at sea, the sea of commerce, and that you, the man or woman, are acting as trustee for the infant, and you know where the infant is, but you're not telling, but you're still taking care of the infant's interest. Continuing on, and make a claim to the estate or trust assets that are held in abeyance. I suspect one must prove he is not civilly dead, and the only way conceivable to do this is by providing the footprints taken of the baby at the time of the creation of the certificate of live birth and match them with the living man who has returned, or by declaration of status. Upon further review of this matter, it may not be wise to make a claim to this estate, as too there is yet another rabbit hole to go down. According to Commissioner versus Estate of Field, and that's a 1945 case, it goes, and this is why and again I have to thank Boris for coming up with this. Thus, until decedent's death, it was uncertain whether any of the corpus would pass to the beneficiaries or whether it would revert to the decedent. Decedent retaining a string attached to all the property until death severed it. The entire corpus was swept into the gross estate and was taxable accordingly. It makes no difference how vested may be the remainder interest in the corpus, or how remote or uncertain may be the decedent's reversionary interest. If the corpus does not shed the possibility of reversion until at or after the decedent's death, the value of the entire corpus on the date of the death is taxable. Since the corpus of the trust did not shed the possibility of reversion until the decedent's death, the value of the entire corpus on the date of death was taxable under Section 302, parentheses C. So again, this gets to be a very complicated situation. Potentially, you can come back from life, and as a result, if you were to claim, again, per how I'm reading this, if you were to say those public individual estate funds were yours, you would have to get a full accounting, which is under UCC 9-210, I believe, and see what came in, what was made, the value of those, or the collateral report, asset report of those funds, and then be liable as the executor to pay the taxes, etc., etc. But of course, you would have a lot of those funds available for your use, I guess, as the grantor. But I don't quite see things that way, and that could be the right way or the wrong way. I guess it all depends how one sees it. Continuing on, from these minor quotes from the case, it appears that should the remainder of the corpus not be shed, then the entire estate is taxable and require the liable person to pay the tax. When the birth event is turned over to the state takes and sells, assigns, conveys, transfers the beneficial interest to or for the account of the United States. In essence, what appears to happen, the United States monetizes that title, the birth certificate title, and receives unrealized billions of Federal Reserve notes, which are liens against the estate for the sole purpose of funding the occupant, or the United States, and its administrative and military operations. Should the man, now age of majority and of sound mind, return from the sea of commerce, he now must account thereof of that estate's financial activities and then take the appropriate actions. When the hospital delivered title or piece of property to the state received that title and registered it, that name as a birth event, and kept the original title in abeyance. Failing to give that original title to the parents, but instead issued a certified copy, the state sold interest under the Social Security Administration in that title to the United States. Therefore, the property or title was conveyed, transferred, and assigned to and for the account of the United States. Where does this leave man? Once again, as naked and spoliated. Under this scenario, everything man does in that name automatically vests in the state. What can the man do other than not claim any reversionary interest or potential of future claim to these estate funds held in trust? in that name or title, since he cannot own anything in this system. I mean, think about that. We really cannot own anything in this system. And I don't think that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean, we're only here temporarily as travelers on this planet, and I believe personally to learn, atone, help, or be of service and experience what this planet has to offer. I don't say that's a good or bad thing, but that's my belief system. In continuing on, to find man's peaceful remedy with what has already taken place, and I mean that by the war on the land or declared national state of emergency, it looks like there must be a full and complete unconditional surrender, acknowledgement, and acceptance of this fact to the government to ensure the fiduciaries as trustees, executors, and administrators administrate that name or property that belongs to the state. Since the man now has made peace and makes no claim on state property, it is required by law that the state step up to the plate and take good care of its property under the rule of usufruct. The state now must no longer consider the man a belligerent, and that is, of course, a presumption under their rules. It is interesting to note that under notes section for 12 U.S.C. 95A shows the following. October 6, 1917, I think it's chapter 106, section 5, parentheses B, 40 stat 415, September 24, 1918. What it is just go under the notes. I don't know how easily you'll find that since the Cornell removed the 12 U.S.C. 95A because people were starting to get wise. But anyway, continuing with this, the actions, regulations by the President of the United States or the Secretary of the Treasury since March 4th, 1933, pursuant to the authority conferred by Section 95A of this title, are approved and confirmed. It appears that during the time of war, the President may, through any agency that he may designate, and under such rules and regulations as he may prescribe, by means of instructions, again reinforcing the non-importance of Congress with respect to the emergency war on the land or bankruptcy of the United States. Continuing on, finally, and I quote this, this is a quote, well, unverified at least. The secret to success is to own nothing and control everything. And this was by Nelson Rockefeller, but it is an unverified quote. As a peaceful inhabitant, a man, I write to inform you, I am what I am, divinely created by the Creator. I do not consent to act as any executor, trustee, fiduciary administration, or administrator of any infants or names, trust, or estate. If I have meddled in affairs in the past that do not concern me with regard to improperly using the state's property, I ask for forgiveness. I was not aware, nor was I ever told by any government official otherwise, that I may have been claiming state property falsely as mine. I want to remain in honor with everything and everyone. For clarification, it seems that I have been left naked, where the principal has delegated authority to the agent for the benefit of the principal, as evidenced by a copy of usufruct compliant certified receipt signed and sealed and delivered to me bearing that name or trust estate. I have enclosed a copy of the indemnity receipt signed, sealed, and delivered to me with full faith and credit of the United States of America. Let me just stop a second. I think I have mentioned this previously, but if you have not had the opportunity to have the birth certificate that was sent to you authenticated, I would strongly suggest you do so. Let me quickly go over what that is and how you get that done. For instance, what I did was I got a copy of the birth certificate. So it's signed by the Vital Records Director. This happened to be in New York. I then looked online, and I think in New York it was specifically